15th day.
He taught a generation of Northwest youngsters lessons for a lifetime. Lessons about the spirit of adventure and about the richness of our corner of the world. He was Captain Puget, and he was Don McCune. We went exploring with him. We sang with him. Many grew up with him, and many loved him. Tonight, we celebrate a man who touched our lives. Good evening, I'm Dick Foley, once a fan and later privileged to be a friend of Don McCune. Don had legions of friends. He was that kind of guy. Many of those friends joined with his family today to say goodbye. Cancer took Don and took him quickly, but it didn't take the spirit and sharing of Don's life. Many of you have asked us to give you a chance to look back at the years Don shared with us all on television. For the next half hour, without commercial interruption, that is just what we will do. We'll share the remarkable life of Don McCune. And what a life, and what a time it was.
Sail ho! Aye, look out, and what ship she be?
A schooner, sir, the Windward 4.
Aye, and that would be Captain Puget, loaded to the gunwales with a cargo of adventures, songs, and cartoons for his young mates.
I'm a Puget Sound sailor on the old Windward 4. Give me way, hey, blow the man down.
For 9 years, Captain Puget sailed the sometimes stormy seas of early Northwest television, taking his young first mates on fascinating voyages aboard the Windward 4, and along the way, entertaining us with songs, colorful yarns, and cartoons. As Captain Puget, Don became a local icon, a friendly father figure who, over the years, brought smiles to thousands of Puget Sound youngsters.
Our bosun went to the topmast high with the spyglass in his hand. There's a whale, there's a whale, there's a whalefish, he cried. She blows at every span, brave boys. She blows at every span. Our captain stood on the quarter deck, and a brave little man was he. Overhaul, on your davit tackles fall, and launch your boats for sea, brave boys, and launch your boats for sea. We struck the whale, and away he went, and he lashed out with his tail. And we lost the boat and 5 good men. And we never got that whale, brave boys. And we never got that whale.
Religion was always important to Don, and for 14 years he hosted one of television's most unique religious programs.
Good evening. The program is Challenge. It brings together a rabbi, a minister, and a priest. Tonight, we're going to cover the biggest news story that ever occurred in the city of Seattle. It's the story of that infamous day, June 6, 1889.
Don's favorite program was Exploration Northwest. In many ways, it was a natural extension of his Captain Puget show. Only this program took grown-ups on voyages of discovery. A proficient outdoorsman who loved nature and animals, Don found his natural calling as host and writer of this remarkable institution, which ran for 21 years. Every Saturday evening on Como TV, Don and the crew treated viewers to a spiritual journey by air, canoe, horseback, skis, or snowshoes into some of the most beautiful and secluded corners of the greater Northwest. Don went on most of these weekly journeys, usually writing his scripts during the quiet moments, helping the crew haul film gear, eating on the trail, and singing songs around the campfire at night.
Except for the open and the close of each subject, which is scripted beforehand, usually underway. What comes in between is pretty much as it happens. But after 20 years of filming outdoor adventures...
We told you it's as it happened.
You don't know what to look for. As happy as a butterclam when tides are high, I sing a grateful ode to Puget Sound, the land of everything. I love it from Tulalip, from Puyallup, swim and fish, and to the Dosey Wallops, where so many times I've fished. And I'm supposed to have some brown bread today.
Yep.
Brennan to the Bogoshiel, from Lemmy to Lacush, and from the lordly Salda to the lovely Dutta Bush, from Samish to Sammamish, from Suquamish to Quilcene. The climate is so friendly, it's a land that's evergreen. Jimicum and Stillicum, where spouts the gooey duck, the singing Stillaguamish and swirling Skookum Chuck, and Moclips and Copalis, where the razor clams abound. A little bit of heaven is a shack on Puget Sound. There's peace on the Skokomish, on the Queets, and on the Hoe. There's calm on the Nisqually, born of ageless ice and snow. A land that nature loves so much, she stays a whole year round. I'd trade a royal palace for a shack on Puget Sound.
Don once told us that Captain Puget didn't just ride off into the sunset. He hung around and did some other things. Now that's typically modest. After TV, Don did indeed do some other things. Things to make the television industry better, to make the community better, and to make the environment better. He was a tireless activist on behalf of those causes, a Captain Puget who practiced what he preached. Don was also one heck of a storyteller. And after 20 years of exploration, he had great tales to tell. So did the people who worked with him on that phenomenally successful program. It ran for 21 years. Now, just for comparison, Gunsmoke, the longest-running network show, ran for 20 years. So, in a way, you could say Don outdrew Matt Dillon. Don was quite a draw in the ratings, too. On any given Saturday night, as much as half the television audience might be tuned in to Exploration Northwest. On top of all that, he won 23 Emmy Awards. And as we hear from his friends, he had a lot of fun along the way.
Don had lined up a horseback trip, and he told everybody that, yes, the cameraman can ride a horse. So on the way over there, he says, well, I told him you can ride a horse. It's easy. Just get on, and you just say, whoa, or giddy up and go. So we get there, and it's a hunting trip, and everybody takes off on the horse, and I film all the horses leaving, and Don's like, he's next to last to leave, and he says, well, I'll catch up to him, see you later, and he rides off, and I'm all alone. Get on the horse, and the horse just takes off. I ended up jumping off of my horse and walking back to the truck and drinking Don's coffee.
I'll never forget, we were on the Clearwater, and Joel and I were in the same boat, and it started getting a little shaky. And of course, Joel said, oh, I can handle this boat, and all of a sudden he ran right into a abutment on a bridge. And I grabbed my camera, I hung onto that, and I got out of there, and pretty soon he tipped over, you know, but I had my camera and I was dry. And Don was down a ways, and the first thing he saw was a watermelon floating by, and then some deer And his Joe went, I says, adios, sucker.
That was also the trip where he was testing out a tent for REI. And it had where these forced round poles, you force them in, you know. And then he had it up. And then when he got ready to take it out, he pulled one. The whole thing exploded and went flying, pieces of aluminum all over. But it was down, I tell you, one little move.
The one thing Don taught all of us was to go to sleep quickly. Don could make a McCulloch chainsaw sound like nothing. Don would go boom, he'd be asleep like instantly, and the sounds would just vibrate through the forest or through the motel room. In those early days, we only had 2 tents for 4 people, or 2 motel rooms for 4 people. So we always would flip a coin or draw straws or paper, scissors, rock, who slept with Don.
And it always ended up that I was in the same tent with Don. And so it was always the little trick of who's going to bed first and who's going to go to sleep first, you know. And we had this deal. The guy started to snore too much. You would lean over and kiss him, and then he would wait the whole night wondering what's going to happen next.
I took the crew out to a real nice dinner, and the best place at that time was the St. Francis Hotel at the very top. And we got up there, and we all knew that you had to wear a coat and a tie, but we wouldn't tell Don. So we got up there, and we got to the maitre d', and he said, "Excuse me, sir, but you have to have a coat." And Don looked and said, "Well, I got a coat on. I got a cowboy coat on. It's perfect." And he had jeans and a nice cowboy shirt and a jeans jacket. I said, "No, sir, you can't." They said, "We'll get you a coat." So they went out and came back with, I swear to God, they went to Century 21 sales shop and got this ugly gold coat. And anyway, so Don walked in, and they put us on a real nice table seat where we could overlook the bay and everything. And Don was going to sit on the outside, and they said, "No, sir, would you please sit way on the inside so your jeans don't show?" So Don says, "Okay." Sat down, and about an hour later, you know, we were halfway through dinner, and Don said he had to go to the bathroom. So he stood up. Now, the bathroom was just to the right, down about 4 booths, and was out. Don went to the left, went all the way around the restaurant, got about halfway, pulled out his pipe, pulled out a matchstick, whipped it up on his jeans, and lit this thing, and proceeded to walk out. And we're just rolling.
Trail mix. And Don was packing the group's trail. We were doing a little backpack story, and we were all divided up the stuff, and Don had all the trail mix for the group. And along the way, Don ate the trail mix. And it came like, "Boy, I'd like to have some trail mix." And Don goes, "Well, where's your trail mix? I ate mine."
And of course, the camera crew always would needle Don about being this movie star and getting all the credit and Mr. Wonderful, and they had to do all the work. You know, there's a lot of that stuff going on, see. And Don was, you know, really got teased a lot. Of course, Bill Bacon could be a professional comedian. I mean, he is truly one of the funniest people in the world. We were getting up one morning on the Bowen Lakes. Don McCune had a mirror hanging on a tree, and he was trimming his mustache or his beard or his hair or doing something. And Bill Bacon was breaking up camp, and he started in, "Mirror, mirror on the tree, who is more beautiful than me?" And he started going, and I'm telling you, people started losing it. And I mean, crying.
We kept it up for days, remember?
Yeah, but I mean, we cried. It was so funny.
We got on the Lady Rose, which is up at Port Alberni, just this little old tugboat that takes food out to people. And he got on the boat, and everybody knew who he was. Before he had even, do you remember when he sat down for lunch, there was the whole boat just clustered around him, and they knew who he was, and he handled them all with such finesse. Such finesse.
We had climbed up, and we got into the Canadian part, and we spent the night just before we were coming out at Lake Bennett, and there was all these men working there, and we didn't know it, but they were prisoners, and Don was carrying a sidearm, and so was I, and they asked these two guards, you can stay here, but we want to tell you that these people are they're prisoners, and we'd like you to kind of take care of your sidearm, you know. And we agreed. Next day, I was doing some filming. I'd get off to one side, and I'd get them going, and they got into Lake Bennett before I did. And they gave Don a bunch of hassle for having a sidearm, you know. And Don says, hey, I'm easy, but there's a guy coming up the track, and you don't say anything to him, and he'll kill you. So I walked in with my .44 Magnum on the hip, and these guys are kind of looking at me. They didn't say anything. And I was kind of watching them. We had something to eat, you know, and they were still eyeing me. And Don never said anything till we got on the train heading back south again, and he told me the story.
The camera just, you know, sort of cantankerous, and Don kept saying, well, you know, let's do something about it. And I said, well, you know, it probably needs to know how to swim because we're on so many rivers all the time. And Don said, well, do something. You know, let's get it fixed. And this camera had chronic problems, like a kid with a runny nose. You know, this camera was always in the shop, always broke. And we spent more money repairing this camera than it cost to buy it new. But finally, after a little encouragement, probably a lot of encouragement, I gave the camera its first swimming lessons. It failed. It drowned in about 400 feet of water.
That's another story. Till next week, then, this is Don McCune reminding you that it's all an Exploration Northwest.
It was always a mystery to Don that even after Exploration Northwest, fans still remembered him as Captain Puget, the sea captain of the children's show that had been in dry dock for more than 20 years. The early days of Captain Puget were the early days of local television. Everything was live and more than a little bit crazy. Performers made it through, often by the seat of their pants. Of course, Captain Puget had some help from a parrot, a sidekick called Salty, and his old buddy, Ivor Haglund.
How long have you and I been shipping out together here?
Oh, about 17 years
yeah,
now.
I guess so.
But we've been around that long.
I was going to ask you, of all the things we've done, what do you think might be the most exciting? We've done a lot of things.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of things exciting around here, but only a month or so ago, right up off the coast of Vancouver Island, whaling.
You're thinking the same thing
You
I am,
bet,
aren't you?
whaling.
Ivor was a regular guest on Captain Puget, a show that mixed sea songs, Northwest lore, and a slice of adventure. Captain Puget went scuba diving, whale watching, and flying over Alaska. But the greatest thrill was going head-to-head with J.P. Patches.
When I first came to Seattle, I received a call from Stan Borson, and he welcomed me to Seattle. He had seen my show and said, let's get together with Don McCune and Bill McLean, who was Brakeman Bill, which we did, and we talked about what I had done in Minneapolis and what they had done here, and it was a real beginning. It was the beginning of a good friendship with all of us, even though we were competitors. I said it's kind of too bad that we're on opposite each other. But the next morning when I was on J.P. Patches, I announced to all the Patches pals, I said, well, kids, yesterday I met all the children's stars in Seattle. There was, well, let's see, what were their names? Oh yeah, Boris Stanison was one. What was his name? Fireman Phil or Brakeman Bob, you know? Oh, and then there was Captain Pungent, good old Captain Pungent. And I used to tease Don. I said, you know, Don, when I was in the service, I got 4 promotions. I said, ever since you've been in Seattle, you've always been a captain. When are you going to make admiral?
When I was 12 years old, I got a chance to go to KOMO-TV and see the Captain Puget show live in person. And after the show, we got to meet Captain Puget, and I knew instantly that he was bound to be a very important person in my life, and I didn't know what because I was only 12. And I wrote a fan letter a few months later telling him I liked his songs. I learned to sing a lot of the songs and play the guitar because he played the guitar, and I watched that and learned that. He always answered my fan letters. Once in a while, when he'd make a public appearance, I would show up, and he came to recognize me as the one who writes the fan letters, and he was always a gentleman, and eventually learned to call me Linda by name. And we sort of continued that way. I wrote one or two fan letters a year, and then I went off to college and became a fisheries biologist. And before I graduated, I wrote him a letter and said I work for NOAA, and I would like to come down and say hello to you at spring break. And I did, and I was an adult then, and we fell in love. And 2 years later, on the same beach where he proposed, we got married.
I think my father's legacy is definitely the out of doors, the environment. He always stressed to take care of where you come from and where you belong, and he sure showed everyone the mountains and the ocean, and not just what they looked like then, but he wanted them to remain that way, and to keep the environment clean so you can appreciate it for long past his lifetime.
I've known Don for years and years. You know, I knew him up in Alaska. We were best of friends up there, and in fact, I took the pictures of him when he tried out for Captain Puget. And so, I mean, our playing around goes way back.
I think all of the thousands and thousands of boys and girls who watched Don became inspired by his adventures, the love of the outdoors, became more aware of our forests and our mountains and the water. And I think he persuaded a lot of them to, if not to go into those fields, become acutely aware of the fragile existence of our environment.
When a person becomes part of our youth, they become part of the fabric of our lives. That's why kids didn't forget Captain Puget, even when they grew up. And that's why so many of us will miss him terribly. We leave you tonight with a song Don recorded just a few months ago. It was part of a special collection called Songs of the Northwest. Songs Captain Puget used to sing to his first mates in the crow's nest. Many of you called interested in this cassette recording, and you can find it in most local music stores. We would like to thank the McCune family for their help in compiling this show, and we'd like to acknowledge co-producers Doug Tolmie and Chris Rahm. Chris was one of Don's former crew on Exploration Northwest. He and Doug helped to put it all together, along with post-production supervisor Steve Quant. Don McCune was a broadcasting pioneer. He was an environmentalist before there was an environmental movement. He was a man before his time, and a man taken too soon. We'll miss him, but we'll remember. We'll remember youthful days of salty songs and Saturday nights of exploration. We'll remember what he taught us about the beauty and the grandeur of the Northwest. And we'll remember that a life well lived is indeed an adventure. So now, one last time, let's look back at the life of a man who truly embodied the spirit of the Northwest.
Looking back in my mind through the currents of time, I see mother, father, and me. Oh, my world was so small, and the time seemed to grow as I waited to turn 16. Got a car, lost my dad, was the worst year I had. Growing up wasn't all I had dreamed. I said, when I'm a man, I'm sure I'll understand. But right now, I need somewhere to lead. As a child, couldn't wait to get older. gonna find what my life's all about. When I turned 35, found it hard to survive. I was mortgaged right down to a dime. I would work to pay bills, every day the same drill. All I wanted was a bit more free time. Now that I'm 65, I now realize that the best years were there all along. They were there as a child, as a teen being wild, as a dad being there, being strong. Looking back through the years, getting older, looking back through each stage of your life, you'll find that each turn has a lesson to learn, and that living's what life's all about, and that living's what life's all about. To embrace every year with its joys and its tears, you'll find out what life's all about. Yes, that is what life's all about.
Until then, we got just one more thing to say to you. Smooth sailing, and bye for now.
He sailed into the harbor and he smiled at what he found. Mighty fir trees, roaring streams, majestic mountains, and the sound. His name was Captain Puget, he was brave and kind and strong. Captain Puget is his name.